The massive council chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of alien species gathered around the circular holographic display. The Zephyrian Empire had declared war on 3 entire star systems, and their invasion fleet was only days away. Admiral Jin stood quietly at the human delegation table, watching the heated discussions unfold around him. The chamber itself was a marvel of alien engineering, with floating platforms that adjusted to each species' needs. The tall, scaled draconians towered over everyone else, while the insect-like hive lords communicated through rapid clicking sounds. Crystalline beings from the Nexus worlds pulsed with different colored lights as they spoke in harmonic tones. The situation is dire, announced Chancellor Vex, the meeting's moderator. His 4 eyes scanned the room as he continued. Intelligence reports show the Zephyrian fleet numbers over 500 warships. We need every available vessel to stand against this threat. One by one, the alien representatives announced their contributions. The Draconians pledged 300 of their powerful battlecruisers. The Hive Lords offered 200 swarmer vessels. Even the peaceful Nexus worlds committed 50 of their defensive platforms. The numbers kept climbing as more species added their forces to the coalition. Then it was Earth's turn. Admiral Jin rose slowly from his seat. At 52 years old, he had seen enough battles to know when he was being underestimated. His weathered face remained calm as hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. The room fell silent, waiting to hear what the newest members of the galactic community could offer. Earth pledges 12 vessels to the coalition effort, Jin announced in a clear, steady voice. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before the laughter began. It started with Admiral Kai of the Draconian Navy, a massive reptilian creature whose scales gleamed under the chamber's lights. His deep, rumbling laugh echoed off the walls. Soon other delegates joined in. The insectoid hive lords made chittering sounds that passed for amusement in their species. Even some of the more diplomatic representatives couldn't hide their smirks. 12 ships? Admiral Kai wheezed between laughs, his forked tongue flicking out as he spoke. The mighty human fleet consists of 12 tiny vessels. He gestured dramatically at the holographic display, where thousands of allied ships were represented by glowing dots. Your entire contribution would be lost in the first volley. A hive lord named Zek clicked rapidly, which his translator rendered as mocking words. Perhaps the humans should remain on their homeworld where it is safe. War is not a place for children to play. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Jin felt the heat of embarrassment creep up his neck, but his expression never changed. He had expected this reaction. Humanity was still new to galactic politics, having only made first contact 5 years ago. Most species saw them as primitive beings who had barely mastered space travel. Your vessels are so small, continued Admiral Kai, clearly enjoying himself. What are they? Patrol boats? Cargo haulers? They would be destroyed the moment they entered weapons range. His yellow eyes gleamed with amusement. Perhaps humans should observe this battle from a safe distance. You might learn something about real warfare. The reptilian delegates around Kai hissed their agreement, a sound that sent chills down human spines. The Hive Lords clicked in rhythm, creating a disturbing chorus of alien mockery. Even the usually polite Nexus beings pulsed with colors that their translators identified as condescending amusement. Jin waited for the noise to die down before responding. Inside, he felt a mixture of anger and anticipation. These aliens had no idea what they were dismissing so casually. But that was exactly what Earth's military planners had hoped for. We understand your concerns, Jin replied quietly, his voice cutting through the remaining chuckles. However, Earth is committed to doing our part in this fight. He paused, meeting Admiral Kai's mocking gaze directly. We will accept whatever assignment you feel is appropriate for our small contribution. Chancellor Vex consulted his tactical display, clearly trying to find some use for humanity's pathetic fleet. Very well, he said finally. Human vessels will patrol Sector 7, well behind our main battle lines. You can monitor for any ships that might try to flee the battle. More snickers rippled through the chamber. It was essentially a babysitting job, far from any real danger or importance. Jin simply nodded his acceptance. We understand, he said once more. We will do our part. As the meeting continued with serious tactical discussions that no longer included Earth's input, Jin allowed himself a small, secret smile. Let them laugh now. They would sing a very different tune once they saw what human engineering could really accomplish. The moment the Zephyrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace, every sensor operator in the Coalition Armada knew something was terribly wrong. What? Should have been 500 enemy ships stretched across space like a metallic storm cloud, filling sensor screens with thousands of hostile contacts. Impossible, Admiral Kai whispered from his flagship's command center, his reptilian features twisting in disbelief. Intelligence said 500 vessels maximum. The tactical display updated frantically as more Zephyrian ships continued materializing from the swirling hyperspace portals. 1,000 contacts became 2,000, then kept climbing. The final count settled at over 3,000 enemy vessels, each one larger than anything the Coalition had ever faced. The Zephyrian dreadnoughts were monsters of engineering that dwarfed even the Coalition's mightiest battleships. Some stretched nearly 10 kilometers from bow to stern, their hulls bristling with weapon systems that defied classification. Strange energy patterns danced along their surfaces, creating an almost hypnotic display of power. By the ancient spirits, breathed Captain Dex of the Nexus Worlds, his crystalline form pulsing with fearful orange light, those are not warships. They are mobile battle stations. The Coalition had arranged their forces in the standard battle formation that had served them well for centuries. Their 2,000 ships formed disciplined lines, with the heaviest vessels at the front and support craft positioned safely behind. It was a formation designed to maximize firepower while protecting vulnerable ships. It meant absolutely nothing. Against what came next, Admiral Kai gave the order to open fire, and the space between the two fleets erupted in brilliant light. Thousands of energy beams, plasma bolts, and kinetic projectiles streaked toward the Zephyrian formation. It was the most concentrated bombardment in galactic history, enough firepower to destroy entire planets. The Zephyrian shields absorbed every single shot without even flickering. What kind of defensive technology is that? Demanded a Hive Lord commander, his mandibles clicking in agitation. Our weapons are having no effect whatsoever. The return fire came like the wrath of angry gods. Crimson energy beams thicker than starship hulls reached out from the Zephyrian dreadnoughts, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a small moon. They carved through Coalition formations like hot plasma through tissue paper. The first ships to die were the proud Draconian battlecruisers at the front of the formation. These vessels had been the backbone of Coalition military might for over a century, their armor plating capable of withstanding sustained bombardment from entire fleets. The Zephyrian weapons cut through them like they were made of cheap plastic. Admiral Kai watched in horror as three of his finest ships simply ceased to exist. One moment they were there, proud symbols of draconian power. The next moment there was only expanding clouds of superheated gas where they had been. "Evasive maneuvers!" Kai roared, but it was already too late. A crimson beam struck his flagship, directly amidships. The energy tore through deck after deck, vaporizing everything in its path. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the ship as atmosphere vented into space through massive hull breaches. 3 entire decks containing over 500 crew members were simply gone. "Sir, we have to retreat," shouted his tactical officer, a young Draconian whose scales had turned pale with terror. "We cannot fight these ships." All around them, the Coalition fleet was being systematically destroyed. Ships that had seemed invincible were exploding like fireworks against the night sky. The careful battle formations dissolved into chaos as captains broke ranks to flee for their lives. "All ships emergency withdrawal," Admiral Kai finally ordered, his pride shattered along with his fleet. "Scatter and regroup at Rally Point 7. The mighty Coalition armada, which had seemed so impressive just minutes before, fled in all directions like frightened animals. The Zephyrians pursued methodically, picking off stragglers with cold efficiency. Victory was no longer a question. It was just a matter of how many Coalition ships would escape the massacre. Far from the chaos of the main battle, 12 small human vessels drifted quietly through the darkness of Sector 7. To any outside observer, they looked like nothing more than patrol boats, the kind of ships used for routine security sweeps around peaceful trade routes. Their hulls were sleek but unremarkable, their weapon ports few and seemingly weak. Inside the flagship Indomitable, Admiral Jin stood in what appeared to be a cramped command center. The bridge was smaller than most alien shuttlecraft, barely large enough for a dozen crew members. Everything about the ship seemed designed for efficiency rather than comfort, a stark contrast to the massive, luxurious command vessels favored by other species. But appearances, as Jin well knew, could be extremely deceiving. "Communications blackout is holding steady, sir," reported Lieutenant Cho from her station. "No incoming signals from the coalition fleet." The young officer's voice carried a hint of tension, despite her professional tone. They all knew what was happening in the main battle zone, even without direct contact. "Good," Jin replied calmly. "Maintain radio silence until further orders." He turned to study the tactical display, which showed the 12 human ships spread out in a loose formation. To enemy sensors, they would look like a standard patrol group, certainly nothing worth worrying about. That was exactly the impression they wanted to give. Commander Na moved through the bridge with practiced efficiency, checking each station. At 38, she was one of Earth's most experienced space combat veterans, though most aliens would never guess it from her slight build and quiet demeanor. Like all the crew aboard the human vessels, she had been hand-picked for this mission. "Engineering. Reports all systems nominal," Na announced. "Folded space generators are online and stable. Internal reconfiguration is ready to begin on your command." Jin nodded, his fingers dancing across his command console. What looked like a simple control panel was actually the most advanced computer interface ever developed by human technology. Every system on the ship, and indeed throughout the entire human fleet, was connected through quantum-encrypted networks that updated faster than thought. "All vessels, this is Admiral Jin," he spoke into his headset, using a private channel that existed only within the human fleet. "Begin internal transformation. Authorization code Omega-77. Throughout the 12 ships, crew members moved to their battle stations with choreographed precision. They had drilled this procedure hundreds of times during the journey to the battle zone. Every person knew exactly what to do and when to do it. Deep within each vessel's hull, systems that had remained carefully hidden began powering up. Massive energy conduits that shouldn't have been able to fit inside such small ships started channeling power to weapons that defied conventional physics. The ship's computer cores, compressed into impossibly small spaces using technology the rest of the galaxy couldn't even imagine, began calculating targeting solutions for weapon systems that didn't officially exist. "Folded space expansion beginning now," reported the chief engineer from his station. On the main display, Jin watched as sensor readings from his own ships began changing dramatically. Internal volume was expanding exponentially, revealing compartments and weapon systems that had been compressed into dimensions smaller than atoms. "Phase 1 initiation complete," Commander Na announced with satisfaction. "All vessels report successful transformation." Jin smiled grimly as he watched his small patrol boats reveal their true nature. "Begin Phase 1. Time to show them what human engineering really looks like." 3 months before the Zephyrian threat emerged, a secret meeting took place deep beneath Earth's Strategic Command headquarters in Geneva. The conference room was filled with humanity's brightest military minds, engineers, and scientists. Admiral Jin sat at the head of the table, studying holographic displays that showed detailed intelligence reports about galactic military capabilities. "The numbers don't lie," said Dr. Kim, Earth's leading expert on alien technology. "Every major galactic power measures military strength by fleet size and visible firepower. The Draconians have massive battleships with enormous energy cannons. The Hive Lords rely on swarm tactics with thousands of smaller vessels. They all think bigger. He's better." General Park, a weathered veteran of Earth's last major conflict, leaned forward in his chair. "That gives us an opportunity. Throughout human history, our greatest victories came when we were underestimated. The Trojan horse fooled Troy because it looked like a gift, not a weapon." Jin nodded thoughtfully. He had spent weeks studying every successful military deception in human history. Ancient armies hiding soldiers inside hollow wooden horses. World War II operations, where inflatable tanks fooled enemy reconnaissance, modern stealth aircraft that appeared as tiny blips on radar screens while carrying devastating payloads. The prototype folded space technology is ready for field testing, announced Dr. Lee, the project's chief scientist. We can compress enormous internal volumes into extremely small external dimensions. A ship that looks like a patrol corvette could actually contain the firepower of a battleship. The room buzzed with excitement as Dr. Lee activated a holographic demonstration. The display showed a small vessel no larger than a typical scout ship. Then, like a magic trick, the internal structure began expanding to reveal massive weapon systems, power cores, and defensive shields that should have been impossible to fit inside such a compact hull. The aliens judge everything by external appearance, Dr. Lee continued. They see our small ships and assume we're technologically inferior. They never consider that we might be using spatial compression technology that's completely unknown to them. Admiral Jin stood and walked to the tactical display. Sun Tzu wrote that all warfare is based on deception. When you are strong, appear weak. When you are ready, appear unprepared. The galaxy expects humans to follow their rules to build bigger ships with more obvious weapons. He paused, looking around the room at the assembled officers. But humanity has never fought that way. We've always emphasized quality over quantity, intelligence over brute force. While they build massive fleets, we'll build 12 ships that can outfight 1,000. Captain Yoon, who would command one of the prototype vessels, raised his hand. What about crew training? This technology is completely different from anything we've used before. 3 months of intensive preparation, Jin replied. Every crew member will know their ship better than their own heartbeat. We'll drill every possible scenario until these operations become second nature. As the meeting concluded, Jin gathered his future captains for a final private briefing. Remember this moment, he told them quietly. When we reach the battle zone, every alien will look at our small fleet and laugh. Let them. Their arrogance will be their downfall. The room fell silent as each captain absorbed the weight of their mission. They were about to prove that sometimes the smallest packages contained the biggest surprises. Commander Vrak of the Zephyrian 3rd Strike Wing was having the best day of his military career. His squadron of 30 heavy cruisers had just finished mopping up scattered coalition survivors when their sensors detected something interesting in the outer system. 12 tiny vessels, apparently human, were maintaining a patrol pattern in what the aliens had designated as a safe zone for primitive species. Look what we have here, Vrak announced to his bridge crew, his 4 eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. The Zephyrian commander stood nearly 3 meters tall, his armored exoskeleton gleaming under the bridge lighting. Like all of his species, he viewed other races as inferior beings meant for conquest or elimination. Shall we ignore them, Commander? Asked his tactical officer, a younger Zephyrian who was still learning the art of psychological warfare. They appear to be insignificant patrol vessels. Vrak's mandibles clicked in amusement. Absolutely not. We will make an example of these primitives. Let their destruction serve as a message to any other species that might consider resistance. And the Zephyrian squadron moved toward the human patrol with leisurely confidence. Their ships were each 5 times larger than the human vessels, equipped with weapons that had just proven unstoppable against the mighty coalition fleet. Destroying 12 tiny patrol boats would be little more than target practice. Open communications. Channel, Vrak ordered. I want the humans to know who is killing them. The transmission connected immediately, showing Admiral Jin's calm face on the main screen. Vrak was slightly surprised by the humans' composed demeanor. Most primitive species showed fear when facing Zephyrian forces. Primitive humans, Vrak announced in his most intimidating voice. You are in the presence of the Zephyrian Empire's 3rd Strike Wing. Surrender your pathetic vessels immediately or face complete annihilation. Admiral Jin studied the alien commander for a long moment before responding. His expression remained perfectly calm, almost amused. You should have studied human history more carefully, he said simply. Vrak's confidence faltered slightly at the human's unexpected response. What did you say? I said you should have done your research, Jin replied, then switched to an internal channel. All ships, begin transformation. Show them what they're really facing. What happened next defied everything Vrak thought he knew about technology and physics. The 12 human ships began changing before his eyes. Hull plates that had appeared solid started sliding apart, revealing internal structures that shouldn't have been able to fit inside such small vessels. The ships expanded like mechanical, flowers blooming in fast motion, their true forms unfolding with breathtaking precision. Massive railgun turrets emerged from concealed ports that had been invisible moments before. Energy projectors that belonged on dreadnoughts deployed from what had seemed like tiny sensor arrays. Point defense systems sprouted from the hulls like deadly thorns, while shield generators powerful enough to protect battle stations hummed to life. "Impossible," Vrak whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "The sensor readings, they can't be accurate." His tactical display updated frantically as the computer systems tried to process what they were seeing. Each human vessel now registered as a full battle cruiser, with weapon signatures that exceeded anything in the Zephyrian database. Admiral Jin's smile was colder than space itself. Fire. The moment Admiral Jin gave the order to fire, space erupted in a display of destruction unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The human weapons didn't produce the familiar energy beams or plasma bolts that dominated galactic warfare. Instead, they launched projectiles that seemed to bend space itself around them. The first Zephyrian cruiser to die didn't understand what hit it. A railgun projectile from the human ship Defiant struck its forward shields at a significant fraction of light speed. But this wasn't an ordinary kinetic weapon. Human engineers had discovered how to manipulate gravitational fields, turning each projectile into a miniature black hole that lasted for microseconds. The Zephyrian energy shields, which had effortlessly absorbed the Coalition's most powerful weapons, simply ceased to exist around the impact point. The projectile continued through the hull as if the armor plating was made of paper. Internal explosions rippled through the alien vessel as critical systems failed in cascade failure. "Impossible!" Commander Vrak screamed from his flagship's bridge. "Their weapons are tearing through our defenses like they're not even there." More human ships opened fire, their weapons tracking targets within human precision. Each projectile was guided by artificial intelligence systems that could calculate millions of variables in nanoseconds. The Zephyrians tried to return fire, but their massive energy cannons seemed sluggish and predictable compared to the lightning-fast human assault. Crimson energy beams from the Zephyrian fleet lanced out toward the human vessels, carrying enough power to vaporize small asteroids. The alien commanders expected to see the primitive human ships explode into clouds of superheated gas. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The human ships' hulls rippled like liquid metal where the energy beams struck. The adaptive armor absorbed the incoming energy and distributed it across quantum-linked matrices that spanned the entire vessel. What should have been devastating killing blows barely registered as minor damage on the human ship's status displays. "Sir, their armor is actually getting stronger where we hit it," reported a panicked Zephyrian weapons officer. "The energy is being absorbed and redistributed somehow." Commander Sue sat at her weapons console aboard the Indomitable, her fingers dancing across controls that managed firepower beyond galactic understanding. She had trained for this moment for 3 years, learning to coordinate multiple weapons, systems that operated on principles most species couldn't even comprehend. "Target priorities updated," she announced calmly, switching to formation pattern Alpha 7. The human ships moved with fluid grace, their formation shifting like a school of fish avoiding predators. But these fish had teeth. More gravitational, projectiles streaked toward the remaining Zephyrian vessels, each one finding its mark with deadly accuracy. One by one, the alien ships died. 17 minutes and 38 seconds after the engagement began, the last Zephyrian cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "All targets neutralized, Admiral," Commander Sue reported with professional satisfaction. "No damage to our vessels." Before dying, Commander Vrak had managed to transmit one final message to his fleet. "The humans, they're not what we thought. Their weapons, impossible technology." Admiral Jin studied the tactical display with quiet satisfaction. Phase 2 begins now. Signal all ships. Begin Hunter protocols. Supreme Commander Thresh sat on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching tactical displays that made no sense. The destruction of the third strike wing had been shocking enough, but now his sensors were reporting impossible movements from the human patrol fleet. 800 ships against 12 tiny vessels, he muttered to himself, his mandibles clicking nervously. This should be a simple extermination. The Zephyrian main fleet had reorganized quickly after receiving Commander Vrak's terrified final transmission. 800 of their most powerful warships now converged on the human position, enough firepower to destroy entire planets. It was overwhelming force applied with methodical precision, exactly the kind of warfare that had made the Zephyrian Empire dominant across 3 galaxies. But the humans weren't following the rules of conventional warfare. Admiral Jin stood in his command center, studying holographic displays that showed the approaching enemy fleet. "Execute Formation Delta," he commanded calmly. "All ships implement Hunter protocols." The 12 human vessels immediately split into 3 groups of 4 ships each, but this wasn't a simple division of forces. Each group activated advanced FTL drives that operated on principles completely unknown to galactic science. Group Alpha, begin pursuit pattern 7, Jin ordered. Group Beta, flanking maneuver on the eastern formation. Group Gamma, prepare for deep strike operations. What happened next shattered everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about space combat. The human ships didn't charge headlong into battle like honorable warriors. Instead, they vanished. "Where did they go?" demanded Commander Zek, captain of a Zephyrian dreadnought. His sensors showed empty space where the human ships had been moments before. The answer came in the form of devastating surprise attacks that materialized from seemingly nowhere. 4 human ships dropped out of hyperspace directly behind the Zephyrian rearguard, unleashing a concentrated barrage that destroyed 3 enemy vessels before vanishing again into FTL. "Contact human ships attacking Sector 4, reported a communications officer. "Impossible," Thresh growled. "They were just attacking Sector 12. How can they travel that distance so quickly?" The human FTL technology was fundamentally different from anything the galaxy used. While other species required minutes or hours to charge their hyperspace drives, human ships could jump almost instantly. They appeared, struck with devastating precision, and disappeared before the enemy could even target them. "Sir, we're losing." "Ships faster than we can track them," reported the tactical officer, his voice strained with panic. "The humans are hitting us from multiple directions simultaneously." Captain Dorr of the cruiser, Vengeance, transmitted frantically to the fleet. "Command, they're everywhere and nowhere. How can 12 ships be attacking 6 different formations at the same time?" Fear began spreading through the Zephyrian ranks like a virus. Ships that had seemed invincible were simply disappearing from formation, picked off by an enemy that fought like ghosts in the darkness of space. Supreme Commander Thresh was growing desperate. For the past hour, his massive fleet had been chasing shadows across the star system. The 12 human ships continued their hit-and-run attacks, appearing just long enough to destroy more Zephyrian vessels before vanishing into hyperspace again. "Commit." "The reserve squadrons," Thresh ordered grimly. "Every available ship moves to intercept these humans. We'll surround them with such overwhelming numbers that they won't be able to escape." Over 600 Zephyrian warships now prowled through the system, forming a tightening net around the areas where the human ships had been spotted. It was the largest concentration of firepower the Empire had ever assembled for a single engagement. Admiral Jin watched from his command center as more and more enemy vessels committed to the hunt. His tactical display showed red dots representing Zephyrian ships spreading throughout the system, exactly where he wanted them. "They're taking the bait," Commander Na observed quietly. "The entire enemy fleet is now dispersed across multiple sectors." Jin nodded, his expression calm despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. "Signal all vessels, execute Phase 3. Throughout the human fleet, captains who had been waiting for this moment began activating systems that had remained hidden until now. These weren't just weapons or shields. They were command and control networks that connected to something much larger than 12 ships. "Release the swarm," Jin commanded. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for centuries to come. The space around the Zephyrian fleet suddenly came alive with movement. From asteroid fields, where nothing should have been, hiding, sleek shapes emerged like deadly insects leaving their nests. Nebula clouds that had seemed empty began revealing metallic forms that had been waiting in perfect silence. "What are those?" stammered a Zephyrian sensor operator. As his screens filled with new contacts, the planetary shadows that had provided cover for the human hit-and-run attacks disgorged waves of small craft that moved with inhuman precision. Rocky debris fields revealed themselves to be cleverly disguised staging areas for weapons that defied detection. Each drone was smaller than a typical fighter craft, barely 20 meters long. But appearances had already proven to be extremely deceiving when dealing with human technology. These tiny vessels packed the firepower of full-size destroyers, their compact frames housing weapons systems that violated every known law of physics. "Over. 200 new contacts," screamed the Zephyrian communications officer. "They're coming from everywhere." The truth hit Supreme Commander Thresh like a physical blow. "We've been deceived. The 12 ships were never their entire fleet. They were just the shepherds driving us into position." Admiral Jin studied his tactical display with grim satisfaction as the swarm converged on the scattered Zephyrian formations from every direction. "Now you face humanity's true strength." The carefully prepared killing field was about to become operational. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. For 6 brutal hours, the Zephyrian Empire's supposedly invincible fleet was systematically torn apart by weapons that seemed to operate outside the known laws of physics. Supreme Commander Thresh watched in mounting horror as his mighty dreadnoughts, each one a symbol of imperial power, were reduced to floating scrap metal. The human drones moved like a coordinated organism, striking with precision that no living pilot could achieve. Every attack was calculated for maximum damage, every maneuver designed to exploit the smallest weakness in Zephyrian formations. "Sir, the Eternal Dominion reports critical damage to all primary systems," came a terrified report from his communications officer. "The Void Crusher has lost main power. The Death's Edge is requesting immediate evacuation." The gravitational weapons that had destroyed the first Zephyrian patrol were now being used on a massive scale. Each projectile created tiny distortions in spacetime that collapsed energy shields as if they were soap bubbles. The advanced hull armor that had protected Zephyrian ships for centuries crumpled like paper under the assault of forces that shouldn't have been possible to weaponize. But even more terrifying were the quantum-entangled projectiles that some human drones carried. These weapons bypassed conventional defenses entirely, appearing inside enemy ships without ever crossing the space between attacker and target. Zephyrian engineers had no defense against weapons that violated the basics principles of cause and effect. "All ships, emergency retreat," Thresh finally ordered, his voice breaking with defeat. "Scatter formation, every vessel for itself." The few surviving Zephyrian ships fled in terror, their crews spreading word of humanity's impossible capabilities to every corner of known space. The empire that had conquered 3 galaxies had been broken by 12 small ships and a swarm of drones. Far from the battle zone, the coalition leadership watched the destruction through long-range sensors, the same delegates who had laughed. Gad humanity's pathetic contribution now sat in stunned silence. Admiral Kai's scaled hands trembled as he processed what he was seeing. How is this possible? Those tiny human vessels have accomplished what our entire fleet could not. Chancellor Vex stared at the tactical display showing the expanding debris field that had once been the Zephyrian Armada. "We need to speak with the humans immediately. This changes everything." Admiral Jin received the priority transmission from the Coalition Council within minutes of the last enemy ship fleeing the system. The holographic display showed the same alien faces that had mocked him just days before, but their expressions had completely changed. "Admiral Jin," Chancellor Vex began carefully, "the Coalition Council formally requests an immediate audience to discuss mutual cooperation and respect." Jin studied the debris field floating outside his ship's viewport. Twisted metal and dying. Energy signatures marked the graves of an empire that had seemed unstoppable. "Never underestimate a species that survived its own worst instincts," he murmured quietly. We've been preparing for war since we learned to make fire. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.